So I've recently been watching quite a few television shows, and I'm always looking for some new bullshit to put on my screen because, I don't know, I genuinely cannot sit for more than 10 minutes with my thoughts without going absolutely fucking bonkers. That being said, of all of the streaming services that I would anticipate to have good content in them, Apple TV Plus was not one that I would have had my money on. And I even remember when Apple TV Plus had initially come out a few years ago, the shows that it came out with, I think there was the morning show, which was okay, and then there was C, which I never watched. But more recently, Apple TV Plus is really kind of becoming a behemoth with a few good shows and one really great show being Severance, assuming that they actually stick the landing on that one. But it also has another one of my personal favorites being Slow Horses. I highly recommend both of those shows. I'm sure you've already heard of Severance, everybody has at this point, and Slow Horses is maybe not quite as big, but really entertaining, and I would highly recommend it. That being said, there was recently a show, I think it came out either early this year or late last year, called Widow's Bay. Now, I heard a lot of really good things about this show, which is why I initially decided to give it a shot, and I will admit the first episode is, I don't want to say does the rest of the show a disservice, it is still a good starter, I just think it's a bit slow, and some people might feel disengaged by the end of the first episode, but I really encourage you to stick with it, especially if you enjoy it even a little bit. So, Widow's Bay is a horror slash mystery slash comedy that takes place on an island off the coast of New England. Where in New England, the show leaves purposefully ambiguous, but I do actually want to get to that in a little bit. Now, the first few episodes of the show actually kind of go along with the sort of a monster of the week type format to it, which I was a bit disappointed of when I first watched the show because I was sort of expecting more. But despite those early episodes, I actually really did enjoy the dynamic of the different characters, the really subtle humor. I will say the humor is not forced whatsoever, and I think the fact that they call this a horror comedy, the comedy is used very lightly, very sparingly, but used very, very well, and I kind of think that's how it should be. Now, the initial premise of the show is that, once again, it's an island off of the coast of New England. I believe they say it's a 3-hour ferry ride, which is long. It's 40-something miles off the coast of New England. And it follows this guy, Tom, who happens to be the mayor of this small island and is basically trying to increase tourism to get, presumably, income into that town. Now, the town itself has a creepy atmosphere and weird things keep happening. It seems at first it's fairly stereotypical small town with weird shit happening, sort of Scooby-Doo-esque in a way. And like I said previously, it kind of follows this monster of the week sort of formula where each episode is a different scenario or monster that the main character has to endure in some way. Now, of course, the main character, who is the mayor, ends up being in denial of these creepy episodes and is basically pretending that these things aren't happening in order to boost tourism. You can't exactly have tourists coming to a haunted island where they might fucking die. I won't get into too much detail, I don't want to get spoilery because I do recommend this show wholeheartedly, but around the 3rd or 4th episode, the dynamic of the show starts to change a little bit. And I would say in a lot of other horror movies where something were to happen and the rest of the characters are kind of brushing it off, I think the show strikes a really good balance in those initial episodes in making it seem like, yeah, we did sort of see the creepy things happening, but it's also reasonable as to why these things would be brushed off. Unfortunately, it gets to the point where it's just too obvious and too problematic to ignore, which is when the main character, along with some supporting characters, sort of start to investigate the issue. What I think is the coolest part about this show is it's less a comedy horror. It definitely has some creepy atmosphere as well as some funny jokes here and there. I really want to say that this show is actually more of a mystery box, similar to that of Severance, not in the same vein, but this sort of idea where there's lore being dropped around, you're kind of having to figure things out. It's definitely a lot less obtuse than Severance seems to be. I mean, we are 2 seasons into that show and nobody knows what the fuck is going on. Although I do love mystery boxes. My personal favorite show of all time is a mystery box, and I think it's done extremely well, but we're not talking about that right now. Another thing I really like about the show is because it takes place off the coast of New England, there's almost this aura of realism that's attached to it, because they're mentioning real life places like Martha's Vineyard, Bar Harbor, Portsmouth, New York City, and Boston. There's even one point where the main character, the mayor, says, fuck Cape Cod, and another instance where the reporter that actually comes to the town to check shit out says that the town could be the next Martha's Vineyard, which the main characters are very floored about. Now, one of the more interesting things about the show, and I mentioned this at the beginning of the video, is that the show purposefully keeps things really ambiguous as to where it's actually located. But in this video, I'm going to talk about where I fucking think that this takes place. So first things first, we have call-outs to, different areas that are actually in the northeastern United States, like New York City, which, yes, is not in New England. You have Boston, Bar Harbor, Martha's Vineyard, Cape Cod, Portsmouth. Now, something that almost all of these places have in common is they are either in or in close proximity to Massachusetts. Now, I understand that there's a Portsmouth, Rhode Island, and there's a Portsmouth, New Hampshire, but if we're keeping with the theme of a lot of these places being islands like Bar Harbor, Martha's Vineyard, Widow's Bay, I'm assuming that the Portsmouth that is being referred to within the show is most likely Portsmouth, Rhode Island, which is one of 3 towns/cities that's on Aquidneck Island in Rhode Island, despite it being accessible by car, but Bar Harbor is also accessible by car. Massachusetts, I believe, is the only New England state that's explicitly mentioned by name. Even the main character grew up in Massachusetts. So despite this being an ambiguous New England island, it does seem like that the state that's most likely to be associated with the island is Massachusetts. Furthermore, the emphasis that the main character, the mayor, really wants this island to be the next Martha's Vineyard, it would only make sense that Martha's Vineyard must be in relatively close proximity. And what state is Martha's Vineyard part of? Massachusetts. Although they could pull a bait and switch and just say that this is like a part of, I don't know, fucking New Hampshire or Connecticut or Maine. Even if it's like Rhode Island, I'll take Rhode Island. So despite there being numerous references to Massachusetts within the show, I think it's also pretty important to mention that the filming of the entire show took place in Eastern Mass, in places like Rockport, Gloucester, Groton, Worcester, and Sudbury. So I think this gives more than enough evidence to the fact that Massachusetts is most likely the state that Widow's Bay is a part of. Whether or not this even proves to be important for the show itself, we'll have to wait and see. Man, I feel like a conspiracy theorist. Anyway, the show is really excellent. There's a lot of puzzle box elements, but yeah, I would say it's definitely like more of a mystery puzzle box than it is a comedy horror, if that makes sense. Anyway, the whole entire series is 10 episodes. I believe it has been renewed for a second season, and each episode is about 35 to 45 minutes. I personally binged the entire show in a single night. It was a great experience, and I'm pretty excited for season 2. So yeah, that's my personal recommendation. Hope you like the show. Yeah, alright, that's it.